Hey, what's up, everybody? I haven't recorded a lot of games, mostly because I've been really busy, and for a while we were just cranking through games for the league. And now that league's over, I felt it would be fun to kind of go back and look at some of our clan, Izmailovski's greatest hits. This particular game was against Hiller. It was a low points 1809 coalition game. Sorry, 1809 fifth coalition game. It was, I believe, 28 points. We were coalition. We brought Kollowrat, Bellegarde, Keinmeyer, and Diest, and the Imperial brought Lefebvre, Marmont, Jerome, and Poniatowski. Um, the map is, I believe it's Saxony 4B. You'll notice that it doesn't have a whole lot in terms of LOC. There's two 4-pointers, one in their rear back here, and their 1-pointer here. This 1-pointer here in the town has commanding heights for Imperial, looking over it, but they do have to cross a river to maintain it. Uh, Coalition gets this side, which has okay hills, um, but the problem is they're kind of like boxed in by these rivers and trees, so they're somewhat funneled into the guns of Imperial on this map. So they have the choice of either breaking out this way to the north and striking for this 1-pointer, or kind of fighting around on this side in the more open space and striking for the enemy 4. Um, Knowing that the enemy in this case had Lefebvre Jerome, we figured in terms of speed we should actually be matched pretty nicely with the slower Austrians and against the slower um, Bavarians and mixed German allies. Um, we figured like an L2 Kollowrat Bellegarde that's pretty big could at least get into position around the same time as the enemy. We sacrificed a lot of our infantry and basically brought Bellegarde as our main body and utilized a DS cav corps because we figured, again, with their lineup, their majority of their cav would come from maybe Poniatowski, um, and maybe a little bit from Jerome. So overall, conceptually, we were hoping to swarm them with the mediocre light cav of Diest. We went a little experimental in terms of our also taking Kollowrat's avant-garde division. You'll see that it has things like the Actor, which is actually quite good, um, decent-ish scrims, horse guns, and also 4 cav of its own, 2 of them being lancers. So we had a lot of light cav. And then our final point was Keinmeyer, which can be kind of a goofy core. He brought the L5s to have some flexibility and then some L1 mass to fill in, and then the horse guns. And we did bring one guerrilla unit um, to take this center house, at least at the beginning, to kind of deny space. Um, Something that IZ had been working on throughout the season was more grand strategy of trying to force the enemy into uh, making maneuvers that we wanted them to through what we would call like a deep strike, using a fast independent core to make an attack and draw enemy resources away. So that way, whenever our main body hits, we could have a like definitive weight of force in localized areas, and then the sort of probing side deep strike unit would be fast enough to redeploy and come back to the main body to recombine for the main attack. So in this case, we were trying to use Kollowrat for that, and Kollowrat was going to go from the south position and strike towards the 4, while the main body of the army came up around here to defend, and we would deny the right screening with light cav. Um, in some games, this has worked pretty well. In other games, we lose spectacularly due to, either miscommunication or misdeployment or not following through, or maybe the, you know, deep strike element gets caught out and destroyed, or maybe because we send a full core off, there's not enough left to hold the center and the enemy concentrates and destroys us. Um, so we had like
taken the
a
building, sir.
okay-ish win rate, but not that great overall. Um, this particular game just happens to highlight our like revised concept of um, gameplay pretty well, so that's why I decided to cast it. It just adds like a little bit more of the strategic element that it can be present in NTW, not just the tactical parts. So again, we based ourselves around the idea of a main body built around Bellegarde, and then a flexible element or deep strike element of the L5s from Kollowrat, a sort of pre-screening element, and ultimately a reserve in Diest, because he's our initial light cav, but he also has a couple heavies to serve as our sort of dedicated smashing reserve, and then Keinmeyer to fill in the gaps of basically just to hold this space and tie down points higher than him. I'll fast forward a little bit. You can see that Imperial is trying to take these heights, which is pretty standard. They'll go probably like this, and then here. And if you get 12 pounders up on either of these locations, it's really, really hard for the coalition to defend this one pointer. I'll keep fast forwarding. IZs have played on this map quite a bit. We've had mixed, I think, results. We've tried a lot of different plans of attack, and typically we overthink it and come up with new plans that probably are too avant-garde in terms of how the game should be played, which sinks us in some cases. So early on, we tried to press our light cav advantage, knowing that in general we should have a definitive light cav advantage across the board. The Bavarians did bring a decent amount of cav. I think that's one of their dragoons, and then there was 2 lights. And then there was Polish cav over here, supported by a pair of horse guns. Overall, the idea was that if we can screen this side, like this entire flank from the enemy, then they might not know that we're deploying everything to this side. And likewise, if we can screen this side for as long as possible, they might just think of it as like maybe one army while the majority of our forces are supposed to be here. I would say that's typically the way this map is played. It turns into a big grind fight in this center here. I personally am against doing that type of maneuver for us, at least. Just doesn't fit into the way that we tend to play the game. It also can be a little bit boring because it just ends up being like a huge static fight here, and eventually one side outgrinds the other and breaks through. Or someone makes a mistake by extending maybe too far across the river or something along those lines. So this time we also decided that we weren't going to waste this L4 in the house. We knew that we couldn't support this building. The only thing that we had was the small bits of Keinmeyer, still very far away, and some cav, and we didn't want to waste it on good French lines. Especially since that wasn't the point of our maneuver anyways. We want to draw them into this position. The other concept was if Imperial keeps attacking towards our 4, Keinmeyer could fall back and trade space for time. And that would allow me as Bellegarde to come into the flank, or, you know, we could reorient our army as we need to. I don't know if Chain got greedy here or if he just got caught out. I don't remember, I didn't see it, but gets away okay. We have pretty good scouting, Polish infantry, Bavarian infantry. We know that the full 5-pointer, Marmont, is right here because he's the only one with French flags.
This building has fallen
That
to
infantry
the
is pretty good, and Marmont is probably one of my favorite low point armies in the mod right now. Jerome sounds like he's flanking somewhere around here. You can hear the infantry. So if you kind of look at the disposition right now, the Imperial forces are horseshoed kind of like this. And then you can see where we are. We have nothing facing this direction, but we figured with this nice river line here, that could slow down an assault. And we also had decent enough scouting on the right to know if they were going to push into Keinmeyer's flank there. Fast forward again. I think this is probably like the difference that you get in playing organized games versus pub games, is the fact that you can kind of tailor the entire army, not just a single corps, to a specific strategic goal. So, we tried to make sure that we didn't have too much overlap in types of units. So, the dedicated role of Kollowrat, a dedicated role for Bellegarde, Diest also a dedicated role, and so on and so forth. And the whole purpose is to, win a strategic battle and less so a tactical. Tactical being like localized fighting in the case of NTW. The individual micro skills, the ability to like deploy small units in where they need to be, that doesn't really suit us very well. I'd say our micro is okay, but it's definitely not the best. I brought small 3-pounders because they were fast and they're fairly affordable for Bellegarde. The nice thing with 3s is that you can skip them really, really far and do decent amounts of damage. And the fact that they're F5 meant I could get them up pretty quickly and start hammering into the French positions. So it does look like they're just gonna turtle the Jerome on the right. And we've basically withdrawn everything from that direction. Meanwhile, Kollowrat as well, Keinmeyer has pulled back from the town, but left some scouting ability here, and we're still pushing light cav around the flank on this direction. Horse guns to try and see off enemy cav in the forest, and our own guns pushing the center here. So from the coalition's perspective, almost all of our stuff is hidden. They have no idea where the main body of our infantry is. They don't know about Kollowrat's flanking maneuver. They've just seen some of his cav kind of probing into their backlines. They also don't know that there's literally no infantry on this side of the map. So right now Jerome is not facing anything other than literally like 3 light cav. We were a little nervous at this point that they figured it out when we saw Poniatowski retreating this way, that they could just cross the river here and push through our flank. But I think they really lacked the scouting knowledge to know what's going on here. Chain was taking a fairly long way around to the fore. At this point, he probably could have just cut straight across and started drawing their forces away. And again here, the idea is that we're not going to overcommit anything. We're in a position to fight for the late game, or at least the mid game turn. Like we have to let this develop. So there's no point in throwing Bellegarde into a grinding fight in the center when he's not scouted. I kept myself in a position where I could react if they did end up attacking Keinmeyer. The idea would be that I could cross the river here in this direction and attack the flank if they pushed out this direction towards our 4. So if Keinmeyer is like creating a roadblock this direction, I'd be hitting their flank with all of the cav and other assets from Diest. And then they would have to cross this river or this river to reinforce on this side. Here I'm just giving them something to kind of look at. I want to keep some assets here pinned. So them seeing infantry, I was hoping would, you know, kind of conceptualize that idea for them, that there is an army over here. Because Chain is still hidden on this open flank while he's pushing towards the 4. So the other idea would be if they shift themselves from this line and they're going this way, my infantry here would be able to intercept while Chain is pushing this direction. Again, Jerome is still basically all the way over here, as far as we're aware. We don't need too much detail at this point, other than we know that his guns are over here and at least his cav. So there's a fairly high chance that, you know, quite a bit of his assets are still split over there. Likewise, we see Marmont's infantry. We don't know where Poniatowski's infantry is, but given that his general is here and you can, I think, hear some drums. There might be Poniatowski infantry here. Yeah, you can hear the drums slightly. Now the game's kind of been given up. Like, you can see these units are no longer hidden. They managed to get a decent spot with one of the lancers there. And I'm just trying to shoot down these guns, get some free hits. Same with these other 115 range skirms, just picking away at units. Okay, so there we see all of Jerome is still actually containing himself, fighting nothing on this flank. A little bit of cav play here. Some Bavarian lines. I was thinking maybe I could snipe him in with the Ulanen, but I don't think it was worth it anyways. And we're still just kind of letting this left develop. Managed to catch a cav here. Somewhat lucky, I think, because that's actually a really shit light cav. It's the Marmont provisional, and in many cases it routes like on contact to Austrian light cav. So right now they have lock, which is probably why they're being somewhat passive, and they have better terrain overall than us. There's no point in them technically attacking, because ultimately that would maybe cause like an opening for them to make a mistake. So while they have their 4, this one and the one over here, there's not really an imperative for them to make an advance against us. You'll notice that my light cav has become hidden here in the center. It means that they've pulled a lot of their light cav screen away. We probably could have pushed our light cav a little bit more to get better scouting knowledge, especially in this dead zone here. Dead zone. Because we don't really know what they have at the 4, there's a possibility that Chain's walking into like, 2 core or something, but we don't actually know that yet. we can take an educated guess on where they are based on, you know, this information. We know the Bavarians are probably here. Jerome is over here. This general is moving away, so the French lines of Marmont are probably shifting on this road. And then now we finally see the Polish infantry here in the woods. Yeah, not much else to say about that right now, at least. And now I'm starting to scout here to try and fill in the gaps as well. Because we did recognize, I guess, this game was played like 3 months ago, I think, at this point, or 2.5 months ago. So I don't remember all of the story beats, just the main strategic elements. I felt more confident knowing that my cav and things were hidden at one point. They do have spotting now here in the center, but for a while they actually didn't, which gave us an advantage. You can see now Jerome has recognized that there's not a lot going on this flank here and has started to filter into the town. Likewise, we're consolidating our resources. We have a pretty good idea of the scout on the right, and we're gonna mass up over here. The main body of my army, though, is still unspotted. I like Bellegarde more than the other 9-pointer, Rosenberg, because the base infantry, while you don't get quite as much of it, is, in my opinion, better quality overall. Slightly better morale, some of it has chakras, a little bit more squares, a little bit better shooting, and Bellegarde has, I believe, 1 more star over Rosenberg, which, while it doesn't sound like a lot, does help quite a bit. These horse guns just mulching through infantry here. If you know us, we really like horse guns for their flexibility. They just have a lot of mobility assets that when you're trying to move guns around, you know, horse artillery especially has that little bit extra. Looks like Poniatowski is going on a counterattack here. Executed his own. Little naughty there by Chain. That cav was charging this cav, which is why that light infantry was not actually given a charge bonus. So at this point, we understood that there was 2 cores all the way over here. Marmont is showing up, Poniatowski. So that's a 7 versus a 5 and a 9, or sorry, 5 and a 7. With that weight understanding, we felt somewhat secure in making, or at least beginning, an attack here in the center, especially since I had been unscouted for so long. We felt that the attack could go pretty well, especially if we swing back in on this flank. So at this point, we sent everything forward. DS had arrived in force. We had a pretty good understanding of what was going on this flank over here. And again, 3,000 or so Austrians appearing in the center is pretty difficult to deal with. So, in actuality though, this is 9 points, more or less, against, what is that? The Bavarians are an 8, and this is another 8, I believe. We did tell Keinmeyer to start advancing on this flank just to put pressure on him because, you know, now we have maybe a dicey position in the end.
Our men are running, sir.
We do trade arty there. I think, again, my guns are cheap, so ultimately we're in a better space. Yes, just kind of picking away at the flanks here. The main attack of our army is coming in this way still. There's a nice open gap between the two corps that we can maybe exploit. You can see that even though Bellegarde's infantry quality is like, you know, not spectacular, it is good enough to break through this Rhineland infantry, which is a mix of the Danes, some of the French, some of the Bavarians. We sent heavies in to break the Bavarian center here.
Our men are running, sir.
And following it up with more infantry to kind of, you know, cover the assault. More cav coming across because we feel that the Bavarians are at their tipping point. And likewise, we told Shane to stop the attack on the 4-pointer and bring everything here. This was going to be the decisive engagement, especially when we had shattered the Bavarians on this flank. And we were winning more or less here in the center with pretty deep reserves. Keinmeyer is pressurizing this flank of the enemy. So right now we have Diest, Bellegarde, and Keinmeyer against a falling apart, or at least partially falling apart Bavarians, and a split Jerome. So Jerome is covering this part and over here, and then the Bavarians were like something like this, with maybe more reserves somewhere around there that they had been maybe shifting to try and counterattack over here. So Marmont's on the offensive. Poniatowski is still way over here. C1's still chewing through, and we're just grinding through this Bavarian line at this point. Or sorry, Rhineland lines. There was some lag in this game, if I remember correctly, which made it a little difficult. You can see like how some of these orders go really wonky. It's a telltale sign of lag. One of my foot guns, I guess, got sniped somewhere. But now we're bringing even more of our cav over. We figured this has to be broken through, no matter what we do. Chain gets counterattacked pretty heavily here. like I said, Marmont is quite good in general. He's got speed and French quality, so that's right now a 5-pointer beating up a majority of the 7-pointer at least. But the main fight is here. So this is kind of what I mean by like, you know, pushing elements out to dangle at the enemy for tactical or strategic reasons. Initially, we got Poniatowski out of the fight and Marmont. Now we're kind of losing a 7-pointer for a 5,
Our men are
but
running, sir.
we are pushing through this middle section and gaining decent ground against their 2 8s, which are their highest pointers. Kind of a, at this point, still kind of to be determined. We are running a little bit out of steam. I mean, I have a full column of infantry ready to keep pressing the attack, but they are bringing up more guns. They do have cav left. The Bavarians are rallying. It does look like Chain stabilized his frontier with some more infantry and his cav showing up. The one downside for Marmont is that he doesn't have the cav to kind of run people down. But again, we are trying to get him back to our fight. Like, leave this over here, it doesn't matter. This is where we win the game or lose the game.
Our men are running, sir.
The problem with column gameplay, which is like how we've been trying to play, is that with laggy games you end up walking over some of your own units. So like I had shift selected like my whole army to try to march it forward while I'm like microing over here and microing over here. Overall though, the idea is that, you know, we have local concentration of force. And again, we're still trying to make things happen on a couple different flanks all at once. So Kollowrat is engaging here to try and strike into the line of retreat of the army. So you have Kollowrat's attack here, my main column's coming this way, Cav coming in that direction, and just like a pinning force here. And then we have our fourth element down in the south. The other, I would say, benefit for what we call, again, column gameplay is that we have all these spaces to try and make cav charges. You don't have to, ideally, move too much of your infantry out of the way to make the attacks. So like these C1s have a natural gap between my lines, and same with, you know, this gap here for the C4 to catch those units as they're running away. And their cav is having to walk in front of our infantry to try and counterattack that. This flank again has kind of stabilized, but again it's tying down, at this point again, more resources than what its point value is. So the French took quite substantial losses here, or the Imperials, I guess I should say. Not definitive losses, but they did lose quite a bit of their cav. Infantry's running low. We also lost a lot of our attacking elements. A lot of our C4s are gone. We, I think, only have maybe one C1 left. Yeah, one C1 left. But we do have all of these light cav. We told Chain to bring them over immediately to try and finish this off. The downside for us right now is that we're kind of racing against the clock. We don't want them to recombine anything that's remaining to make a definitive counterattack. So we can tell these lines are on their breaking point. They don't have a lot of cav left to try and counterattack us. But if we have cav, then we don't have to wait there and shoot them. Especially since their armies keep rallying and coming back. So, again, going in with light cav to catch him on the retreat. In this case, it's somewhat worth it to trade one light cav for, that catching the enemy models. It disrupts the retreat of the enemy, but now we're kind of in a surround. The benefit is we have this nice road to send our C1 down, and maybe the Bavarians don't have too many guns remaining. But yeah, as you can see, we're not, out of the woods yet. It's not a complete victory. There was this tactical play that had to be done. Marmont was unable to push through and gets caught into like a grind fight, which he's not the best at because it's still a 5-pointer. I guess Chain left his horse guns out of action because he crossed them earlier to save them, so he left them as a token of goodwill, I guess, off to the side. So DS still has cav. Kollowrat's cav has arrived to try and help clean up these flanks here. And we've also stabilized our front lines, just resting, regrouping, getting ready to make our final attack. As you can see, we still have quite a bit of infantry available to us. That's my bad. Again, this game was kind of laggy, so those types of things are not really excusable, but does suck for that Polish cav. It's a waste anyways to send cav in unsupported like that. Chain completely disengaged from this side and is arriving on my left flank. And we have light cav now pushing around their flank to the side there. A good way to take houses is to completely ignore the house if you can and kill everything around it. They won't have the morale to, back up their units anymore. At this point though, I think, you can kind of see the writing on the wall for the Imperials. They've formed this smaller and smaller perimeter, and their units are constantly in retreat. They have almost no assets left in terms of cav or artillery. Jerome's on his breaking point. So Kollowrat able to just sort of bully that flank. And our last attack for C1 into the center there. But it allows me to get my infantry into the fight effectively to sort of chew up the ending of this battle here. I'll go ahead and fast forward closer towards the end, because at this point I think you can kind of see that we have the definitive weight of infantry and things like that to pull us through. So yeah, so some misplays here and there from our side. Again, the game was laggy. We probably overextended for a brief period on this open flank. but it did keep Poniatowski, over here instead of over here with his good infantry. We got them to slowly trickle in deployment from Jerome into a couple different frontage. So he had to micro this broad area, and the Bavarians were sort of on this line here. So they were also fighting a two-front war. And we just drove, I don't know what just happened. We just drove straight through the center after we felt that we had a definitive, weight of surprise. Picked off early elements of artillery and things like that, and then just didn't let up with cav. We had enough cav that if they tried to counterattack us, we would, just throw it away. It doesn't matter. If we kill their cav, trade 1-to-1. In the end, we'll have more cav. We had just enough infantry to make things work in, a localized affair. But, if they had destroyed Chain's army over here, or they had pushed Kollowrat's flank over here, then maybe the game turns out differently. But we kept them as much as we could in the dark strategically. So that way, when we did make our attack, it was hopefully decisive. In this case, it was fairly decisive. I don't think at any time did that look like it was going against us when we broke after we started the breaking of the Bavarians. It did get a little hairy here along this line, but generally speaking, not too bad. Marmont maybe overplayed his hand a little on this flank, but you can't really blame him. He was winning against a 7-pointer for a majority of the time. Poniatowski just got paralyzed between where to go, I think.
Men are running, sir.
You can see he redeployed all the way to this right flank after being over here. Which to me doesn't make too much sense, like why his infantry ended up on this side of the army. But yeah, that's pretty much it for this one. I might cast like one where we try a similar maneuver, like the deep strike, and fail spectacularly. This game just happens to sort of highlight the core principles of, maneuvering to draw enemies into the fight that you want to get a decisive fight elsewhere, and then recombining those elements in a timely manner to make the final attack. So you saw that when our attack stalled along this line here, Chain's cav came from the north and then pushed this direction, and his infantry arrived almost at that same time, and that gave us renewed momentum to push through the final little bit there. Otherwise, I think we would have been too tired. We basically exhausted Diest's cav in that first push and a half, but the little bit extra that Kollowrat allocated to us helped us push through. And you can see that Keinmeyer pretty much was able to push through that flank unscathed. It's got very decently statted L5s in there and L4s. And just the sheer mass of having, 3,000 Austrians hit on this one flank was enough. And we had still decent enough reserves behind all of that to keep leapfrogging units forward. So yeah, I hope you guys liked that one. Again, IZ is not perfect. We definitely had some micro issues due to either lag or just skill issue of microing across an entire frontage. I'm really bad at microing big armies, so this is not my usual forte. But yeah, overall, sometimes our big brain moments pay off. We like to, think about army composition, enemy army composition, how we can counter it, what suits the map, how we can kind of shape the enemy to our liking versus just sending 4 corps straight at each other and smashing into each other. But yeah, thanks again for tuning in. We'll see if I keep casting more or not. Just kind of depends on time.